Welcome back. Having completed a series of lectures on nuclear reactions, we will move on to discussing some specific types of nuclear reactions, namely nuclear fission and fusion. We will, in this lecture, introduce nuclear fission. This is a prophetic statement by Rutherford and his co-worker, Soddy. Both of them got Nobel Prize. So I'll just let you read the statement. So there are many interesting things here. So note that this was stated in 1903, even before Einstein's relationship between mass and energy was quantified, and that was in 1905. Uh, so this is rather prophetic. Okay, so first he makes there is latent energy; it's inherent to atoms. Then he talks about the chemical and physical behavior. The radioactive elements do not really differ from the non-radioactive isotopes in terms of chemistry and many of the physical properties. And he also states that even those that do not appear radioactive can be made radioactive. Okay, so this is the import of this final statement, I suppose. Okay. So we'll understand its implications gradually as we progress in this series of lectures. So let's just take an example to see how large the difference is between nuclear energy and chemical energy. So 1 gram of U-235, this is the most important radioactive element, um, can supply 1 megawatt per day. So why is this relevant? So if you take a village near IIT Kanpur, so a typical village may have a power requirement of 1 megawatt. Okay, so it is good enough to supply for one day, but compared to this, you need 3,000 kgs of coal and a lot more of petrol. Okay, so this is rather significant. So the amount of energy via nuclear energy is rather significant. So let's also understand the origins of fission. So Fermi did a lot of important things in many areas of physics, especially in nuclear physics and nuclear engineering. So he was very interested in exploring uh, how neutrons can be utilized to generate trans-uranium elements. Okay, so elements beyond uranium. So the idea was if you irradiate, let's say, uranium with a neutron, it would in turn give rise to higher atomic number elements. Let's say once you have a neutron-rich element, you may have a beta decay, and then you can increase the atomic number. So that was the postulate. He did some experiments, and he actually published it, I think, in 1934. He got a Nobel Prize in 1938. So part of the citation was for his research in this area. Interestingly, a chemist, after the publication, uh, lady radio chemist, a nuclear chemist, conjectured that Fermi's results were incorrect with respect to these results were incorrect. And she had a conjecture that uranium actually broke up. There was uranium fission. Nobody took her seriously because Fermi was a doyen in nuclear physics, and his results could not be doubted by a rather an unknown nuclear chemist. Unfortunately for her, she also did not really provide an experimental evidence for this conjecture. Um, so that was very unfortunate. Later, uh, two other scientists took up her idea and provided experimental proof. Okay, so this was rather dramatic at that time that nuclear atoms can break up into smaller atoms was just unknown. And so the experimental proof involved a lot of chemical similarities of the products that were obtained after irradiating uh, uranium, for example, after irradiating uranium with neutrons. Okay. So, how did these people, these two scientists, analyze? They looked at the product fragments and then looked at chemical similarities between what was the elements that were known already. So, the fragments showed similarity between similarity to smaller um, elements. That is, the elements that had much smaller atomic number. Okay, so that was the experimental proof for nuclear fission. And Han went on to get a Nobel Prize in chemistry. If she had done these experiments along with her conjecture, she would have got a Nobel Prize ahead of this group. Okay, so what I'm trying to also convey is first, not everything that is published, even published by extremely good scientist groups, need to be correct. There can be some missteps, and you may have a bold conjecture, but along with that conjecture, you should also provide experimental proof, carefully done, reproducible experiments, and that might even get you a Nobel Prize at some time. So, what are the options when you think about fission? So, the way it is generally imagined is that you irradiate a high atomic mass element with neutron. Okay, so neutron, when irradiated to this element, uh, gains excitation energy. Okay, we have introduced this terminology in some previous lecture. So, in general, the energy of this nucleus increases substantially, and sometimes it may just be excited via emitting a gamma photon, or because it is a neutron rich nucleus, it may beta decay, uh, and the atomic number may increase by one, or it may even alpha decay, right? So the atomic number also changes. Uh, or you may have nuclear fission. Okay, so these are all other options when this occurs, but we are going to be focusing here on nuclear fission. So a general qualitative mechanism is that we have introduced this terminology called compound reactions, compound nucleus, when we talked about compound reaction nuclear reaction model. So this compound nucleus formed after irradiation with the neutron may have high excitation energy to allow for the deformation of the nucleus. Why do you want to have the nucleus deform? You want to have a decreased Coulomb energy in the deformed nucleus. The decrease in Coulomb energy compensates for increase in surface energy. So why is that? So first you have a spherical nucleus. Okay, so the deformation takes you away from a spherical nucleus. Therefore, the surface energy increases along with increase in surface area. The surface energy also increases. To compensate for this increase in surface energy, there is a decrease in Coulomb energy. So these are the two competing factors. One decreases, another increases. Um, if the if there's an overall decrease in Coulomb energy possible, then uh, there are two fragment nucleus that are formed, F1 and F2, with much lesser atomic number. Because they have to conserve momentum, these two fragments move in the opposite direction. And in addition, they are positively charged, right? So there's a lot of Coulomb repulsion that also makes them move in the opposite direction with increased kinetic energy. So the kinetic energy is due to two reasons. One is Coulomb repulsion, as well as the energy released in nuclear fission also contributes to enormous kinetic energy of the fragments. Uh, Later, these fragments, which might be in the excited state, may also emit neutrons or gamma photons, and which leads to de-excitation. So, if the fragments have high n by z, they may also undergo beta decay. So all these features have been discussed in some earlier lectures. When do you have gamma release? When do you have beta decay possible? Please refer to previous lectures. So the energy released in fission can be calculated. We discussed this while discussing binding energies. So supposing this is the energy that is being considered, we can use the Einstein's mass energy equivalence to get to know the energy involved in fission. So it's good to have a feel for these numbers. With just one atom, one nuclear fission, for example, it's fissioning into these two fragments, the energy released is 200.8 MeV. So this is rather a large amount of energy. So this energy is distributed into different fragments, so different components. So out of this 200, these fragments, F1 and F2, there is molybdenum and tin, take up 168 MeV. The prompt neutron ejected out takes up 7 MeV. There is also prompt gamma that is released, that takes up 7 MeV. Then there's the beta decay that takes up 8 MeV. Then neutrino and gamma from products also release 7 MeV. So there are different pathways for energy release. We will use this term prompt and delayed. Okay, so prompt is immediately the neutron is emitted out. But sometimes when we refer to delayed neutron emission, that means there's after some process happens, supposing after some fragment is formed, after a certain time scale, a neutron can be ejected. Okay, so we will always differentiate between prompt neutron prompt gamma versus delayed neutron and delayed gammas. In the next lecture, we will look at an important feature of nuclear fission that has to do with the reaction cross-section. Thank you.